We've been in this series called Lead with Love the last several weeks, and we're a little over halfway through this little series, this season of this, that as we talk about this, what it means to lead with love. We believe everything has changed when Jesus came to the world and he taught us how to love like he loved. In fact, the night that he went to the cross, he gives us one command. He says, "A new command I give you, love one another." In a way, he kind of takes everything he teaches and he reduces it down to this irreducible minimum. That if you're going to love me, you got to love the people around you. And he did this earlier in his teaching when he takes the two, the commandments, and someone says, "Hey, what's the greatest command of everything?" Jesus reduces it down, and he says, well, not reduces it down. He says, "Hey, this is the most important. This is the priority. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength." So everything you are needs to be devoted to God. That's true love. That's the most important thing you can do. And the second is like it. So in a way, if you do that, this is important too, to love your neighbor as yourself. So he, in a way, says to love God, you've got to love others. And the night before he goes to the cross, he reminds his disciples by pitching it in a new way, reducing it down to one simple thing. And it's a simple thing to say, but it's a hard thing to demonstrate. And it's a hard thing for us as Christians to make this really the common denominator by which every one of us should be identified by. Which we all struggle with how we're identified as Christ, because we want to be identified by maybe the label we put on ourselves, or we want to be identified by what we post on Facebook that we're a Christian, or we want to be identified that we're Christ followers by wearing the Christian t-shirt, or carrying our Bible in our work and putting it on the desk, or we want to be identified with that ichthus little fish thing that goes on the back of our car, and we want people to see that. We don't want to do it any other way. We want to do it kind of in these ways. But Jesus says this is the one way that people will know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. But prior to that, he says, this is the new command, that you love others the way I have loved you. As I have loved you, he said, so you must. There's a requirement here that you have to do this. And so this has been the series' big idea. This has been where we've been taking this idea that if Jesus changed the world by loving you and I, and he gives you and I this common bond, this common command that we are to love others the way he's loved us, then we wanted to create a filter by which we react to every person in our life. I wanted to help give you a filter to help you respond to the people. And you can react when people act out against you, and you can respond when people, or when you're in that really tough situation at work and you don't know what to do. I want this to be the first question that comes to your mind. And it's this series' big idea. What does love require of me? And we're not asking this in the way, hey, what's love require of my neighbor? It's not what does love require of my spouse, because I could tell you what love requires of my spouse in this moment. It's not what does love require of my boss, or what does love require of my employee. It's a personal question that we were taking. What does love require of me based on what Jesus has done for me? And so in doing this, we looked at what Paul mentions as what love is. That he says this is what love looks like. And so we've been looking at this list every week, taking what Jesus says, this is the requirement to love one another. And Paul gives us a beautiful description in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. You may not be a Christ follower, and you've seen this picture. You maybe retweeted this scripture, or you may have shared this scripture on Facebook, and you didn't even know it was in the Bible. And this is the love chapter. And he says this about what love is. And he says, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. And then last week we talked about these three things. It does not boast, it is not proud, and it does not dishonor others. And last week we talked about how our pride and how our arrogance gets in the way, and it causes us to be rude and dishonor others, and it causes us to devalue them and take away and rob the importance from others. And that's not what love does. And then this week, I want us to look at what Paul says next. He gives us three descriptions of love, and this is where I want us to camp out for the next few minutes. He says this, it is not self-seeking. Another way to say that is love is not selfish. And I think every one of us would agree with that. It's not selfish. And then he says, it is not easily angered, and then it keeps no record of wrongs. We're going to talk about these three things, but we're not going to talk about them in this order. I want to break up the order. I want to put anger first. I want to talk a little bit about that not easily angered. And then we're going to come to the other two here in a second. That word easily angered it's like someone with love has a long fuse in their anger. Their anger, they may have anger, and it's okay to have anger, okay? Because write this in your notes. Being angry isn't a sin. And I'm going to explain that here in a second. Being angry isn't a sin. It's people who are loving and do what love requires, they have a long fuse. And we are working on keeping that fuse longer and longer in our life, because the opposite is true, and this is what he says. It's not easily angered. We're not short-fused people. And everybody knows what a short-fused person looks like. They're the ones that you walk on eggshells around. You don't know what's going to be the landmine that pops them today. And when they explode, it's just like it just causes damage in everything. They say things that they shouldn't. In fact, if you ever want to make the speech that you're going to regret, speak when you're angry, because it's toothpaste out of the tube and you can never put it back in. And it's not that being angry is the sin, because anger is an emotion that we all have. And it's really a passion that's in us. The problem is when we don't control the anger in us. See, anger is a power that we need to harness, and we need to harness it to do good, just like Jesus did. Jesus got angry, but in his anger, he never sinned. Hebrews 4 says he was without sin. And in Mark chapter 4, Mark records Jesus going around. In one of these instances, Jesus is getting angry at these Pharisees because he wants to heal this man. And these Pharisees are saying, you can't heal this man. And in this moment, Jesus gets so angry. And he says to the man, stretch out your hand. Now, I don't know if he says it like that, but that's the way I feel it. Because it says he was so angry at the Pharisees and the religious leaders. And he looks at the man, and he points his finger at him. In my mind, this is what I'm inferring in the scripture. And he says, stretch out your hand. And in that moment, Jesus harnesses his anger. He takes all of this passion that's inside of him, because that's what anger does, doesn't it? It creates this, just makes you passionate about something. And he forces it. He takes that pressure, and he does something good with it. He heals a man and brings good, not evil. The problem is, in most of our worlds, we don't do the good with our anger. See, doing good with your anger is being passionate about kids who don't have parents and people who take advantage of those kids. And you take that passion and you take that pressure and that anger that builds up inside of you, and you say, you know what, I'm going to give $35 a month and sponsor a child. That's a good way to control your anger and do something good about it. It's to do something that you hate it when women get abused or kids that get abused. So you take that passion that you have for women and kids who are abused, and you help support an organization that helps against family domestic violence, and you do something with it. It's to say, hey, I hate injustice, and so I do something to harness this passion to do good with it. See, that's how we can do good with our anger. Unfortunately, most of the time, if you're like me, we don't really use that anger to do something good with it. Now, being angry isn't the sin. Look what it says here in Ephesians chapter 4. And in your notes, it doesn't have the full verse, so you're going to have to drop down a little bit to see the full verse as we read it. But it is up on the screens. It says, in your anger, do not sin. He says this, that in your anger, you can be angry without sinning. However, there's a little clause in this. There's a little terms and conditions that apply. He says, do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. What's he saying is don't leave your anger uncontrolled. Don't let the sun go down. Deal with your anger. Control that anger. Do something about that anger immediately. Why? Because of this. And do not give the devil a foothold. You know what a foothold is? A foothold is like whenever you allow yourself to get angry and you don't control something that can control you, you know what you do? You give the enemy control. That's what Paul says. That you give the enemy permission to grab a hold of you and keep you from moving. Or to be more specific to the way that Paul, I think, is describing this. It's more of like a foothold. It's like you give him place in your life. It's almost like in that relationship, you allow the enemy to come in this relationship, that you're angry with that person or you're angry in that situation, and you say, you can set your tent right here. In fact, I give this over to you. And we mask it because that's what anger does. Anger, we try to control things with anger, don't we? I mean, that's what we try to do with this passion inside of us, is we leverage this for our control. We try to control our kids. We try to control our spouse. And that's the bottom line, because when you burst out in anger, you're trying to control something. But the funny thing is you're not really in control when you lose control. The enemy's in control. He's got a foothold on your life. So being angry itself is not the sin. It's how we respond to that emotion inside of us that is a very powerful emotion. And how we harness that pressure. And how we harness this inside, this rage, or this what makes you boil at night, and how you handle that. And do what love requires with that. That's where the power becomes the most powerful force in our life. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. See, being angry isn't the sin. This is the sin. Being selfish. Being selfish is the sin. When we explode in anger, most of the time, it's because we're selfish. And look what James says about being selfish. He says, for where you have envy and selfish ambition, so where you are selfish, there you find every disorder and every evil practice. So can you be a Christ follower and still, can you deal with anger and still need to yes, you can. Because this is something that is a part of our sinful nature. This is a part of us that we want control in our life. That's what put us as an enemy of God, is we want control of our life. And we want to control other people. We want to be God in other people. And that's why we burst out in anger against our spouse. That's why we burst out in anger against our kids. That's why we try to use our anger to control situations, because there's a little bit inside of us that wants to be like God. Actually, there's a lot inside of us that wants to be like God. And when we burst out in anger, it's really rooted in this selfish desire. Whenever we do evil against other people, the evil that we do against other people because of this passion and this rage that's left uncontrolled in our life, then those are the moments that good is not done with our anger and evil is done. And the enemies, Satan himself, shows himself to be truly in control of us. So we have to deal with our anger quickly. The longer we wait to deal with our anger, the quicker we're going to explode in anger toward others. And when we don't get control, we explode in a way that hurts someone else. And if we're going to look at what Jesus says, to love God is to love others. When I explode in anger towards you and I hurt you, I've not done the loving thing that love requires of me. And that's when sin brings death. See, sin always brings death. And if bursting out and exploding in anger is a sin, because I've wronged you, you know what that does? It destroys a relationship. And all of a sudden, there's an erosion that takes place. And because of the things I've said or the things I've done, in my anger, left uncontrolled, that is accomplishing evil because it's selfishly driven, there's death that's created. And we destroy relationship between a parent and a child. We destroy the relationship between a man and a wife. And we destroy the relationships that we have with each other. So the longer you wait, the less control you have on your anger, and the shorter your fuses become. And we want to be long-fused people, because love requires us not to be easily angered. And love requires us not to be self-seeking. Now, here's the reason I believe that we get our fuses get so short in life. You ready for this? This will blow your mind. It's so, this is like the best news that you're going to hear all day. We get angry when we don't get what we want. And but think about it. It's so simple, so elementary. But really, think about it. The reason you got angry and you get angry with your spouse, you know why you get angry with your spouse? Your spouse doesn't give you what you want. The reason you get angry with your coworkers is because your coworkers aren't giving you what you want. The reason you got angry with your company and your boss or your supervisor or whatever the case may be, because your boss didn't give you what you wanted or what you felt like you deserved. And at the end of it, you didn't get what you want from your kids. And so what do? We try to get what we want. We take this powerful emotion inside of us that begins to stir because we're selfishly motivated, we're not getting what we want, and then all of a sudden we try to get what we want and we allow this emotion to come out of us and lash out like a monster, and all of a sudden the Hulk appears and they go, what did they do with mommy? And all of a sudden you become a version of you that's not so loving because ultimately you're not getting what you want. Now, this hits true for all of us because every one of us in some relationship or another has a short fuse, has an area or a relationship in our life that there's something that we don't have a longer fuse. And the trick is, and not a trick, the discipline is to learn how to become people with long fuses because that's the nature of God. When God exposes him and shows himself to Moses, he declares his name as a compassionate God who's slow to anger and abounding in love and kindness and mercy. That's who God is. And if we're going to love God the way that we've received loved, we've got to learn to keep that long fuse on our anger. Now, when we don't get what we want and we bust out in anger, we really we infer a couple things, and here's a couple things that angry people say, that whether it's in their actions and their statements, but I kind of reduce them to three different categories and three different sayings. First, it says, an angry person says, I'm the victim. An angry person says, I'm the victim. I'm the one who's hurt. I'm the one who's been mistreated. I'm the one here that's the victim. And I know when I use a strong word like victim, there are people here that have been abused emotionally and physically. I don't want you to feel like I'm speaking of you. I'm speaking of when we deal with anger that is selfishly motivated to get what we want out of the relationship. That when we do this and things don't go our way and we lash out in anger, you know what we're really declaring? I'm the victim here. Because now there's an expectation that you said you were going to meet and you didn't do it, and I'm reacting to that expectation, and I'm blowing up because I want you to do it this way. And what we say in that is saying this right here. It's not only that we say I'm the victim, but angry people say I'm more important. Angry people say, wait a second, and you've seen this. You ever been in an area where the customer service is part of the business, and that one client comes up and they just make the big stink to where like the whole store can, like all of everybody's attention. They want the attention. Why? Because they feel like they're the most important person in the room. And they feel like that everything should be focused. The world should stop because of me. You should stop everything you're doing because I'm the most important person. And that's what my reactions imply, is I'm the most important. And really what we've done in this is we try to justify our anger this way. We try to say it's okay to be angry because I've been wrong. It's okay to be angry because really I paid for something that I didn't get. This happened to me yesterday. In fact, yesterday was a textbook way for God to test me, to teach me this lesson. So he made sure I knew this coming into today. We went to a restaurant here in town, and I ordered something for the kids, and I only got 3. And you know, inside of you, I had this. You know what I'm talking about. Little Hulk comes about, and your skin begins to turn green. And I know I feel like a really nice guy, but inside I can turn into the Hulk. And so all of this, I'm just grateful I have a lot of self-control. And so in this, I had this moment that I could say, you know what? They probably just so busy, and they were. It was Saturday, and so they didn't give me the 4th item. Okay, I'm just going to write it off. We'll just go. I don't have time to go back. And I made a choice right there. And you know what I did? I said, I'm not the one that's most important here. Because if I would have said I was the one most important, my actions would have said I'm more important. If I would have walked in there and I would have put my sack on the counter like many of people do when they don't get their order right. I want my order right, and you just blow up. I could have done that, but I chose not to. Why? Because it's not about me. It's not about me. And I don't want my anger to display that I'm the one that's more important. And then the last thing it says is this. Angry people say, you owe me. You owe me. See, you created an expectation, you created something in what you said, and because you said it and didn't deliver it, now you owe me. You owe me as a spouse, you owe me as a husband, you owe me as a parent, you owe me as a boss, you owe me as an employee, you owe me this. You owe me. Angry people say I'm the victim, that I'm more important, and that you owe me. And whenever you don't get what you expect out of a relationship, a deficit's created. And it's important to handle that deficit appropriately. It's important for us to let that, it's okay to feel that anger of that deficit created. But we've got to harness that emotion. We've got to harness that pressure that's built inside of us. And we've got to do the most loving thing that we can do, which AKA is the most powerful thing and one of the most Christ-like things that you and I can do with that anger. And that's why Paul says this. See, it's not just that love is not self-seeking. And it's not just that love is not easily angered and that has this long fuse. He gives us a beautiful way, I believe, on how we can keep that fuse long in our anger and how we can make that fuse longer. It keeps no record of wrongs. Doesn't mean that it forgets, no. That word record there is an accounting term. So all of our accountants and CPAs and those of you like numbers and debits and credits and ledgers, this is for you. What that says is, I'm not going to put that in your account. I'm not going to hold this against you. I'm not going to react based on this, on how I respond to you. When he says that it keeps no record of wrongs, he's saying, I'm going to keep no ledger of wrongdoing that you've done against me. I'm going to be slow to anger by choosing to not record this on my account against you. Keeps no record of wrongs. I'm going to be slow to anger by quickly letting go. In week 2, we talked about being patient and how that's tied to forgiveness. And in that story that we looked at where Peter asked Jesus, how many times a day should I forgive somebody? 7 times? Because that's really good. And Jesus says, no, 70 times 7. Well, just think about that number real quick. If you forgave somebody 70 times 7 or 77 times, whatever the case may be, you know what that does? That makes your fuse a little bit longer. Every time you keep no record against somebody, you know what you do to your fuse? You just yank it out a little bit more. And that's what love requires of us. To keep a long fuse on my anger, I must be quick to forgive. The quicker you and I are to not put that against somebody else and put that on their record, then our fuse gets a little bit longer. But you know what angry people do? People who are easily angered, they pull up that list. In the argument, you might pull it up against your spouse, but what about this time, then you just get out your ledger of wrongdoing and you just read out all those debits on that account where they owe you. But that's not what love requires. Love requires something different. Love requires us to harness all of this emotion inside of us. Harness this deficit that you do maybe rightfully owed. And you maybe are right, you have the right to have a family that loves and is together, but because of what your ex has done, that has been removed, and now you don't have the perfect family anymore, and now you have this deficit created. Or now, because of what a parent's done or what a child's done, it's ruined your reputation. And now you you feel like you're owed something and you really want them to go back in time and they can't really do that. But you feel like this is owed you. And you get this emotion. It keeps you up boiling at night. It's the bee in your bonnet or the bee in your britches, whatever, guy, girl, whatever, or unless you're a guy and you wear a bonnet, whatever. But it's what drives you. It's what makes you passionately angry. And we have the moment to take that passion and that pressure and to focus it, and I believe do something powerful with it that is in line with exactly what Jesus does. And that's the teaching big idea for today. What does love require of us? Regarding our anger, what does love require of us? Those times when we get angry and we do evil with it and we don't shape it for the good, how do we make that fuse longer? What does love require of us to make that fuse longer, to be more like Jesus, to do the loving thing that he's done for us? Love requires, write this in, me to cancel the IOU. I am due. In your bulletin, there's a little piece of paper that says IOU. I want you to hold on to that. And I want you to think about it. What do you feel you're owed right now? What is it that you feel you're owed? Why are you not sleeping at night? What makes your blood boil when you go to bed? What keeps you up? What wakes you up in the morning and there's just that irritant there? What is it? What is that IOU that you feel that you are due? Is it because you feel like there's something that you are owed, that someone owes you? What is it that you feel like you deserve something? And what is making you boil inside is something that you feel is something you deserve, and it's making you so very angry. What's that IOU that you do? It makes you want to get even. It makes you want to pay somebody back. It makes you want to see them get their due. What is that inside of you? Who's that with? And this is the question I want to ask you. Can you harness that power, that angry passion inside of you? And can you do something that is the most loving thing that we can do, that is in line with exactly what Jesus has done for us, and cancel the IOU? You're due. It's a hard question to answer. It's a demanding question. But it's a question that we have to wrestle with, and we have to respond to in the way Jesus responded to us. On the night before Jesus goes to the cross, disciples didn't know it was that night. Judas Iscariot betrays Jesus. Now Jesus has every opportunity to really get angry. I mean, we get angry when people betray us, and for whatever reason, Judas betrayed Jesus, and now they're standing there, and one of the disciples, John lets us know it's Peter, he takes out his sword and is ready to fight, because that's what we do when we get angry. We put up our dukes, right? We get ready to fight it out, and we want to take ownership, take control of the situation when it's getting out of our control, and Peter takes his sword out and cuts off Malchus's ear. And the reason he cuts off Malchus's ear, because he missed, he was aiming probably for his head. But he dodged it. And Jesus in the moment tells Peter, put up your sword. And what does Jesus do the next couple minutes? He looks at, first of all, he tells his disciples, do you not understand the power I have? That at one word, my Father in heaven will send legions. We don't even know what legions really looks like. Thousands of angels that can overpower everybody here and protect me and give me what I deserve. Do you not understand that I have that power? Put your sword away. And in the next couple moments, the disciples flee because they don't know what to do next. In fear, they flee. And Jesus goes by himself before person after person. He's whipped 39 times, one whipping short of a death sentence. He takes the beating of insults. He takes the verbal abuse as they give him a cross, and he's carrying it to a place called the skull. And he can't carry it but a quarter of the way maybe, and they get a man named Simon to carry the cross for him. And he, bearing the burden of everything on his back, bearing this whole moment right here where all of sin is coming down on him right now. And he's being punished for something he didn't do. He had an opportunity to get angry. But you know what I believe Jesus did? I believe he harnessed his anger. And he focused it on what he could do as the most loving thing possible. When they came to the place of the skull, they crucified him there. They put a nail in each hand, a nail in his feet, and they lift him up a couple feet above the ground so people could literally almost look him in the eye, hurl insults at him, so he could see every eye looking at him. He had the opportunity to get angry. Most of us would be angry. And what does he do? They crucify him there between two criminals. They labeled him, inferring that they labeled Jesus a criminal. They put one on his right hand and the other on his left hand. And Jesus harnesses all of his power. And he does the most loving thing that he can do. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And then what happens next is they divide up his clothes. They add more insult to him. They profit. They take advantage of him even more. And people stood around watching this, in agreement with this. And the rulers even sneered at Jesus. And then taking this, they said that he saved others. Then if he saved others and he did so much good for others and he claims who he said he was, then if he is God's Messiah, he should save himself if he's the chosen one. And then the soldiers get on the bandwagon of mocking Jesus. They come up and mock him. They offered him wine and vinegar and said, if you're the king of the Jews, as you claim to be, save yourself. And all this is an opportunity. He could at one moment, in one word, smite everyone. But he harnesses his power. And he's already made the choice of what he's going to do with his power. And he stated that by saying, Father, forgive them. There is also a written notice above him that says, this is the king of the Jews. And then Luke records this. One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. So not only was it leaders, it was also the soldiers, but it was even the man sitting next to him that had the same death sentence as Jesus, that Jesus now was categorized as the same as he. And he looks at Jesus and says, hey, aren't you the Messiah? If you're the Messiah, then save yourself and then save me. Because if you deserve to be saved, then I deserve to be saved. And the other criminal rebukes him, puts him in his place, serves him. He says, don't you fear God, since you are under the same sentence? And then he says something that's really, really important for us to get. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. We're getting it. But this man has done nothing wrong. He saw that Jesus was innocent. He saw the innocence and the love of God as he deserved to lash out in anger. He deserved to, in this moment, join these two criminals who were probably hurling insults back when they could catch a breath. Who in there probably had their own anger and they were lashing, but they yet saw this innocent lamb in the middle of them responding totally different. And something happened that made that man see that this man in between the two criminals is so different. And what that was, maybe it was when he said, Father, forgive him. Because Jesus didn't say that under his breath. Jesus made that known. He yelled out, Father, forgive them. This is the moment that you placed me here on this earth, that I would take on the punishment so I could extend them forgiveness. And in this man who sits next to him, a criminal, right before he dies, looks at Jesus and says, hey, I don't deserve anything else out of this. Will you just remember me when you get in paradise? Because I know you're going there. I don't deserve it, but I see you do. And Jesus does the most powerful thing that he can. In love, he looks at this man who all the things that he had done wrong were against him. All those things that put that man on the cross were not done against people that was separated from God. No, because when he sinned against all those people, he was sinning against God himself. And Jesus, God in the body form, crucified right here next to this criminal, looks at him and says, today, I tell you truly. And when Jesus says truly, you will be with me in paradise. I'm going to harness all my power to do the most loving thing I can do. I'm going to cancel that debt you're due. Write this in your notes. Jesus took a punishment he didn't deserve so he could offer and give you and I his forgiveness that we don't deserve. So you have that IOU. What does love require of you today? What does love require of you? This is what I believe love requires of you. One is to identify who owes me. You can write that in your notes. And then after you write that in your notes, if the person's name comes to mind that owes you something, maybe it's an ex-spouse, and you've been holding this resentment and bitterness for a while. Maybe it's a parent, a father, or a mother who did something earlier on, and your short fuse has been really rooted in what they did to you years ago, and they can't go back in time and fix it. But who is it in your life? Is it a boss? Is it a company that did you wrong? And ever since that moment, you've just been a different person, and the fuse has gotten real short on your anger. The way we can make our fuse longer is to start by letting go of the record of wrong. So who is the one that has wronged you? What have they done? Decide what they owe you, secondly. Decide what they owe you. What is it? I mean, really, do you want them to go and put back together the things that they've done? Or is it that you want them to suffer as much as you suffered, and then you're going to be even? Do they owe you that they have to go through that same suffering for you to be even? Are we that evil of people? Yeah, we are. What do they owe you? Write it down. Is it that they have to pay you back for something? How are they going to make that even? What is it that they owe you? Do they owe you your childhood back? Do they owe you your virginity back? Do they owe you a debt that has been incurred? What is it that they owe you? And then do the most loving thing that you can do. Cancel the IOU. And I'm going to tell you how I'd like for you to cancel that IOU today. Up here is where other people, and you may not see this because it's on the same level as you, there are lots of these torn pieces of paper from many today who have come up here and they've canceled the IOU. I'm going to pray for us. I'm going to pray for you. And I'm going to pray for me. That we can be people who are not easily angered by learning how to cancel and do what love requires of us and quickly cancel the IOUs we are due. And there's an IOU, maybe there's several IOUs. Maybe you're sitting next to the IOU. Don't let them see, no cheating either, okay? But today, will you have the courage enough to step out in faith? And here's what I believe will happen. Two things. One, when you cancel that IOU, your fuse is going to get a little bit longer. Every time you cancel an IOU, your fuse gets a little bit longer. and you become more like Jesus in exhibiting and harnessing that power inside of you to do the most loving thing that you can do to somebody. And that's the second thing that happens. We become a little more like Jesus when we forgive the way Jesus has forgiven us. And then something, maybe a third thing. You'll be free. What has controlled you this entire time? What has given the enemy control in your heart and camped out there in that relationship? You'll be free. Because you, in response to what Jesus has done for you, are doing a loving thing to honor him, and you're doing something for him, and not that they deserve it. It's not that at all, but you're doing it out of a response and obedience to what Jesus has done for you, and it's the most loving thing that you can do for your Heavenly Father. It's to cancel the debt that someone owes you. Maybe you're the debt. Maybe you're the one and you can't forgive yourself. Maybe you need to forgive yourself. Maybe your issue is with God and you need to forgive him today. Who is that? Can you cancel that IOU that you're due? This is how we're going to close out the service today. We're going to close it out by giving you the opportunity after I pray to come up here. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to stand, and you can do it all across the front. You don't have to do it here. I want you to cancel it. And let this be a symbol that person no longer owes you anything. What does love require? It requires us to cancel those IOUs we're due. Our prayer partners are going to be available after we pray. We're going to end the song. The band's just going to play and sing. And whenever you're ready, maybe you're not ready today. Maybe you need to take this home and you need to wrestle this down with God. Please feel free to do it. But if you want to quickly take control of your situation and your anger, you want to do the most loving thing, this is an opportunity to do so. Let me pray for us. Jesus, thank you so much for your love that you displayed to all of us. When we deserved to pay you back and when we deserved to pay the penalty for all of our wrongs against you, you harnessed all your power. You harnessed everything you had, and you did the most loving thing in response to us. By being slow to being angry, you responded with love and kindness and mercy, and you extended us forgiveness. Thank you for modeling that on the cross. Thank you for forgiving us. Even before we ever sinned against you, you forgave us. Give us the courage to be people who are quick to forgive. So we model you and reflect you, and we are slow to get angry, and we can do what love requires of us by canceling those IOUs.